Well, welcome everybody to this meditation in the School of Christian Mysticism Lent retreat. Our theme in this retreat is the mystery of the cross, and in particular its relation to the text on suffering from the apocryphal Gospel, the Acts of John. In the farewell discourse that we read in the Gospel of John, which Jesus gave to his disciples shortly before the crucifixion, he told them repeatedly that he's not of this world, and that they too are not of this world. What does this mean, particularly in relation to the words of Jesus taken from the Acts of John, which he's said to have spoken on a hill above Jerusalem during his crucifixion below? You hear that I suffered, yet I did not suffer. That I suffered not, yet I did suffer. I'm going to begin by reading the text or extracts from the texts of the Acts of John. Jesus said here, I put it into your mind to come up to this mountain so that you might hear matters needful for a disciple to learn from his teacher, and for a man to learn from God. And having said this, he showed me a cross of light set up, and around the cross a great multitude which had no one form. And in the cross was one form and one likeness. And the Lord himself I beheld above the cross, not having a shape, but only a voice. And a voice not such as was familiar to us, but a sweet and kind voice, and one truly divine. And it said to me, it is necessary that one man should hear these things from me, O John, for I have need of someone who will hear. This cross of light is sometimes called the Word by me for your sakes, sometimes mind, sometimes Jesus, sometimes Christ. This then is the cross which has united all things by the Word, and marked off things transient and inferior, and then compacted all into one. But this is not the cross of wood, which you will see when you go down here. Neither am I he who is upon the cross, whom now you do not see, but only hear a voice. You hear that I suffered, yet I suffered not. That I suffered not, yet I did suffer. That I was pierced, yet was I not wounded. Hanged, and I was not hanged. That blood flowed from me, yet it did not flow. And in a word, those things that they say of me, I did not endure. And the things that they do not say, those I suffered. Now what they are, I will reveal to you, for I know you will understand. Perceive in me the slaying of the Logos, the piercing of the Logos, the blood of the Logos, the wounding of the Logos, the hanging of the Logos, the passion of the Logos, the nailing of the Logos, the death of the Logos. And thus I speak, discarding manhood. Therefore, in the first place, think of the Logos, then you shall perceive the Lord. And thirdly, the man and what he has suffered. That last sentence will be the ladder on which this meditation will ascend. So I'll say it again. Therefore, in the first place, think of the Logos. Then you shall perceive the Lord. And thirdly, the man and what he has suffered. In this meditation, we shall ascend the mountain with John. For me, talk of going up a mountain relates to spiritual ascent, to contemplative prayer. We shall ascend the mountain with John. Regarding Jesus firstly in his humanity, secondly in his divinity as the Lord, and finally as the Logos. And we'll explore something of the nature of suffering at these different levels. As always, there'll be questions rather than answers. There can be no concrete answers when we enter into this kind of meditation. There can only be any knowledge that we might get from the Spirit, which may not be expressible at all in any kind of words, but can still be known. We begin then with John down at the scene of the crucifixion. Jesus in his human, nailed to the cross and bleeding. Appearing in the external objective world, a world that seems to us to be separate from us. In our day-to-day life, we see the outside world as if it's something separate or different from us. A world that has been created, and then we see it. Perceiving it through the senses. This is a world of dualism, of life and death, bondage and freedom, pleasure and suffering. It's the world of the impermanent and transient. If we believe that only the eternal and unchanging is truly real, then this is a false world. This is the world of the ego self, the delusion that we are separate, autonomous beings, separated from God. This is the world in which Jesus is crucified in his human, crying out, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" Now, with John, who feels that this is too much to bear, we feel the call to start ascending the mountain. And with John, we can see what he described. We can be there with him. A cross of light set up, and around the cross, a great multitude which had no one form. And the cross was one form and one likeness. And the Lord himself I beheld above the cross, not having a shape, but only a voice. We've moved away from using the physical senses to see the external, so-called objective world. We're now using our spiritual senses to perceive the cross and to perceive the Lord in his divinity. This is where the Lord speaks to us. This is the world of Christ, in which we are all one, in whom we are all one. The multitude has no one form. And in the cross which draws everything together and everybody together was one form and one likeness, the likeness of Christ. There is suffering here, but it is a spiritual suffering. The inner spiritual groaning that we all know as the dark night of the soul, which prevents us from seeing the true light of the cross. But we're now being shown that true light. And we can spend some time looking at its glory, looking at the oneness and unity within it, and hearing what the Lord has to say to each one of us. And now with John, we can move even further up the mountain into a place where the atmosphere grows weaker and the clouds appear, a place which is beyond words, beyond expression, beyond knowledge, beyond worldly knowledge. This is the level of the transcendent logos. No dualism here, no bondage or freedom, no birth or death. Here is eternal life. Through the logos, everything was made, the whole of creation. And we come back into the created world, the incarnation of the logos, the first incarnation, the created world, the environment that we think we live in. But as Thich Nhat Hanh says, we don't live in the environment. We are the environment. And we are, humanity is in the process of crucifying that environment, that creation. That the whole of creation groans in pain. When we see that as separate from ourselves, we can think of practical things to do, but the truth is it's not separate from ourselves. It is us. Creation groans in pain because we're crucifying it, and in doing so we're crucifying ourselves and we're crucifying Christ. We can feel that pain when we see ourselves not as separate beings. We can feel the pain, we can hear the groan. It can be quite overwhelming. It can feel like more than we can bear. Just as John had to leave the crucifixion of Jesus because he couldn't bear it. So we've come round in a big circle back to that crucifixion and that suffering. like a great wheel that's going round. But at the center of the wheel, there is fixity. There is I am. All that pain, all that suffering is taken away from us by I am. Rest in I am. Be embraced by I am. Just be. In the state that the Indian philosophers called Sat Chit Ananda, which means being, consciousness, bliss, or in Christianity, the peace that passes all understanding. Only through the mystery of the cross and the crucifixion can we reach this peace, and we can't understand it beyond our understanding. Rest in that peace, rest in that being, in that consciousness, in that bliss that we've been freely given. And so we give thanks to God for bringing us truth, which we know is truth even though it's beyond our comprehension, and even though it manifests in different ways to different people, the truth is always there. That concludes this meditation.